Oh, there we go. That is so much better. All right. So, the shit pipe had become disconnected. And, as we reiterate, there's a layer of poly over here. And under the layer of poly is what appears to be dirt, and that is not dirt, that is my family's shit. Anyhow, this stuff here, I just put on here, and reason being is because if we were to x-ray vision over there, that is the bathroom at the far end of this prefab home, which is for all intents and purposes a trailer. And the drain to the tub, which would be over there, and the drain to the sink, which would be over there, had become disconnected. And the result was, if I'll scooch over, what was originally under here was this black colored vapor barrier. Now the vapor barrier is of course here to keep moisture out, but when the drains disconnected above on the other side of this vapor barrier, what ended up happening was that the vapor barrier acted as a bladder that kept all of the moisture in. So originally I thought when I first found this that it was a local problem, that we only had this whole structure sits on a frame that's essentially like a giant ladder. Like if you look at that beam that I'm pointing at there, and if we were to think of it as a rung, and then there are two large beams, rectangle beams, that span the entire length of the home, which is about 74 feet. And so you've got one long spanner there, you've got your, if we're to think of them as rungs on a ladder that sit between them that keep them from spreading apart or pushing together. And on the other side, I don't know if you can see that, there's another long beam that spans the distance. And so the vapor barrier, when it was acting as a bladder, was dipping down to about this low. And I had originally thought that this problem was just local, that it was only this one area where the bathroom was, that it had affected. Because these spanners that run between the beams, I had imagined would have stopped it. And because there would have been there was a hole through the vapor barrier where this pipe was, I would have imagined that it would have sort of acted as an overflow. But it didn't, because it took a while for the vapor barrier to stretch out and act the way it did. And so when I was down here immediately when I came to reconnect the shit pipe, I could tell that it was down like, holy shit, we have water in here and this is not from that. And just to like push it up, it was like a waterbed, like in the way that it felt and in the sound, in the noise and the sound that it was making. What I didn't realize at that time was that it took a while for the vapor barrier to stretch out, and that before it had stretched out to form like a dipping bladder between the rungs, that it had actually carried down this whole entire span, which is about 74 feet. And so what I've been doing is basically making a slash, hollowing out and digging out all of the insulation that was destroyed and ruined in the water, because the insulation had been compacted by the water, so it wasn't really doing anything, causing pipes to freeze and just not insulating the place. And so I hollowed it out as much as I could. And so in this section where I probably slid it would have been probably about right here. And I would hollow it out, fill it up with insulation, so bring the insulation and put insulation between the joists and then some underneath the joists. And after that, because I had left the original vapor barrier in place, I hadn't removed it, I would tuck up vapor barrier up into the existing vapor barrier and spread it around and work it around in such a way that it would to some extent become self-sealing, because the weight of the insulation that I just put in would have a little bit of weight, not very much, but a little bit that would put a downwards pressure on against the new vapor barrier and the existing vapor barrier. And then I put this layer of insulation, brought it on top, which created a rather extensive amount of upward pressure. So now the original vapor barrier is now sandwiched between the new vapor barrier that I put above the original vapor barrier and this stuff. So I have every confidence. I didn't seal it with tape. I have every confidence that between this upward pressure and the downward pressure, that the original layer of vapor barrier is sandwiched between those two things enough that that it'll be a good. Now, like I said, originally I thought that this is the only section that had been affected. But as I got through it and I dug it out, I realized that all the way down was the same thing. And another problem is the shit pipe here. Now, anyone who's done any plumbing or knows anything about plumbing knows that these things are supposed to be at a constant downward grade. And this one isn't. I'm not sure if you can tell from this picture. It seems like you can, but it actually comes down to ground level, and then it starts to slope up, and then it starts to slope down again until originally it's just resting flat on the ground. Which if we lived in not an Arctic or subarctic climate might not be a problem, but it certainly is a problem in Canadian winters. So we're going to take a journey down through the Tunnel of Love. And we may also be picking up tools as we go along, or things. One of the things that I am going to do about this pipe is, here we have a heat tape, and usually the way you use heat tape is you wrap them around a pipe, but that doesn't give you a terrible amount of distance to work with. The more times you go around it, the more distance you lose. So with this, we're just going to take this one heat tape and we're going to haul it down as far as we can get it. And we're going to add another one where that one ends. And we're actually going to take zip ties to this and zip tie it along the length of the pipe, and then we're going to insulate it. Now, as you can see here, right here is one of these foam boards that I've been putting up. You'll see these all throughout the ceilings. The way that I put these up is I had to really muscle them in. On this side was rather difficult. On the other side, actually took leverage and jacking. And the reason being is that the duct came down just a little bit more than what this would allow. So I actually had to crush the ducting a little bit to get the insulation up. And the further I went along, the more difficult I got, because the ducting starts out, it ends rather thin. It sort of tapers down from the other end of the trailer all the way down. It becomes thinner and thinner and thinner. And I believe that's to end up with a more even distribution of airflow, so that the thinner it gets at the air end of the trailer, the more pressure you have. And wider, where it's wider over there, closer to the furnace, then because the duct is a lot wider, you don't end up with so much pressure. So it sort of evens out the airflow. You end up with a little bit more where there's high pressure at the end of the trailer, and a little bit less towards closest to the furnace. So as you can see, I put these up here. It was a hell of a bitch because I had to get them over these cross pieces. They're longer than the cross pieces, so I had to muscle them in on one end and then pull them down towards the other end, and then put the 2x4s in place. But I'll tell you what, I don't know if these cross pieces weren't like this, man, I don't know what the hell else we would have done, because this is a pain in the ass job, and I would have been here insulating for months. Now, I do somewhat regret the fact that we're only putting 2 down the middle. 2 of these 4x8 sections of insulation, if you're going to think of it as each space between the rungs of the ladder is its own section, and they're just a little bit less than 8 feet. And I would have liked to maybe have put 3, because then it would just be amazing. I have no doubt that had we put 3 of these and completely filled it up, instead of what we did here, where to its benefit, I don't know if you can see that, this is the vapor barrier, and it's resting on this, so it's forming a seal, and this is better. This will make for better insulation than this would have had coming out of the factory. At the same time, had we put 3 in, I do think it probably would have reduced heating costs by $100 or $2 every month in the Canadian winter. You'll also see that I only have 2 2x4s supporting each 4x8 sheet. Tell you the truth, it would have been preferable to have 3, but again, we're trying to keep costs down. I think 2 will do it. And the boards over time, I have every confidence that they will sort of deform. Doesn't matter. In terms of function over form, it doesn't matter. What these are here, they're not even here to provide a seal. They provide their own seal just by being up against the vapor barrier and the insulation that's already existing or that has been replaced in the house. They're just here to provide an extra, if you want to think of it this way, an insulative mass. And one of the big bitches of this job has been moving things like this that are 4x8 sheets in a place that has so very, very little headroom. We'll have a better perspective of headroom later on as we move on down the line. And by the way, I could have put, I suppose, a light on this while I'm recording so that you'd get a better view, but I wanted to share the experience of what it's like moving through the light that you actually have versus the flash. Oh, and over here we have our very good friend, the piss jug, because as you can imagine, it is not a lot of fun. The piss jug is actually frozen. It's not a lot of fun to have to take a piss and to be working anywhere in here and to have to return over there when you have to take a leak. So, God bless piss jugs. Over here, we have some anger management juice, if you can imagine. I do have to say that I am allergic to pink insulation that I have been both removing and installing, and that the alcohol definitely takes the edge off the itch. Alright, and over here, we're going to jump over to the other side of the shit pipe. Sorry if this is shaky, but I'm belly crawling. And I don't know if I mentioned it before. Come here, piss jug. But yeah, GoPro would have been nice. And one of the, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but yeah, one of the hard parts of this job is having to drag down all the materials from one end to the other. Now, to give you guys a perspective of the space I'm in here, I want to say that this insulation is 16 inches, but let me just make absolutely sure of that. It might be 15 and some. Wide, 15 inches wide. All right, now the funny thing happened last night when I dragged this particular batch in, because it was easy to drag the whole bundle in and open it up under here. Then it would have been to drag it in piece by piece. So I did drag a bundle in. I started to open it up, and as I opened it up, realized that it was in this position, and it began to expand rather quickly. If you've ever opened a bundle of insulation, as soon as you cut the plastic, they blow up. So as it was blowing up, I realized, oh fuck, like if this blows up all the way, it's going to get itself jammed up against the ceiling here, and I'm not going to be able to get it apart without destroying it. So very quickly, I flipped it over. At the very last second, I flipped it over and it all expanded sideways, so I was able to make use of it and not have it ruined. But to give you a perspective of what I'm dealing with in the amount of space that we have here, this is a 15-inch. Let me back up. That is a 15-inch piece of insulation on its side. And so if there's probably I'd say about 5 inches between the ceiling here, our top, and the top of the insulation. So we're probably at about 19, 18 inches, and it goes up and down. You'll see there's considerably less space over here and a lot more space over there, and that's just, the ground is uneven, so there's sort of an ebb and a flow to it. Here, again, we have our shit pipe going upwards. Over here, we have my heater I got at PV Mart that was on sale. I like to pretend that this makes a difference. The thought warms my heart. Over here, we have a Porter cable work light. I love this thing, except that I'm having trouble keeping it up and down. As tight as you screw this thing, it's not the most reliable. Now, here's a section that was interesting, and this was a pain in the ass. I kind of wish I'd taken pictures and video before it, because I opened it up and I thought that the end where the bathroom had leaked was the worst of it, but it turned out that this was actually the worst of it. It had its own very separate leak, and the leak was so bad that it had actually destroyed the ducting, because the furnace on these kinds of homes, the ducting runs the entire span of the structure. And so the corners of it, the bottom corners of it, were actually rotted out. And which was, of course, a huge problem, because that means you're not getting a whole bunch of air into the furthest corners of the house where the children are. And to have a tinsmith come in and replace it, I'm guessing, and you know, anyone feel free to weigh in, but I'm guessing it'd be like $200 to show up and $150 an hour after that, at their convenience. And I mean, I needed to get this job done and close it up, because we've got water lines. As it is with the airflow, you have water lines that run the entire span of the trailer. And I couldn't just leave it open, because we have some great weather right now in this area. Great weather I'm talking about for a Canadian prairie winter. which, it's been hovering around -8, but, and with the heater blowing right on the pipes, I was able to withstand it. But the weather can turn at any moment. The weather people get it wrong sometimes. And, yeah, it needed to get done and needed to be closed up. So what I did, was instead of replacing the duct, because also it was a weirdo shape of duct. It wasn't something that you could buy off the shelf at Home Depot. It's something I'm assuming is very particular to prefab homes and trailer homes. And so rather than mess around trying to track the part down or spending tons of money on a tinsmith, not shitting on tinsmiths, they work hard. It's a very specialized craft. But this is my family I'm doing this for. We're trying to keep costs down. And so what I ended up doing was taping up the holes on the duct, and I mean taping the crap out of them, not as a permanent patch, simply to help them hold their structure. After that, because over here it was good. The ducting was still good over here, and closer towards the spanner at the back, it was good over there too. So what I did was I ran, I don't know how many millimeters of poly. It was the thickest stuff that Home Depot had in stock. And I taped it to the duct on one end, and then I wrapped it around very tightly, like snugged it up very, very tightly and very neatly, and I wrapped it around 3 times, and then I went over it with a shit you not, a whole entire roll of tuck tape. Boom, 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 boom. And you can piss on that. Is that the proper way of doing it? No, you will never fucking see Bob Vila telling you that this is what we're doing today. Here's Joe. Joe, what's wrong with the duct? Oh, we're just going to wrap it in some poly and throw a roll of tuck tape on it. But I'll tell you what, I will eat my hat if that layer of duct doesn't outlast this whole house. It doesn't have to be rigid. It doesn't have to be metal. It just has to be safe, and it has to contain the airflow and not let airflow leak. Over here, more evidence of anger management. Oh, what's that? Somebody left milk and cookies. I don't know if I said that this is Christmas Eve, but this is Christmas Eve. You'll just have to excuse me for a second. I'm going to put you on hold. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Merry Christmas, everybody. All right. We are back. All right. So, yeah, there are also 1, 2, 3 plumbing leaks in this area that we didn't know about, and so those all got sorted. And now we'll move down the line, which means we have to hop over to the other end of the ship pipe. That's the technical term. Engineering. Oh yeah, so all the areas under here virtually are all these 8-foot spans. But because I couldn't see what was ahead of me until I'd mined out one section in between the rung ladders again, I couldn't see what was ahead of me, so I'd assumed that these were all somewhat 8-foot spans, as this one is, and as they are there. Over here, I got thrown for a bit of a loop. This is actually a 45-inch span from steel to steel, which means that, well, some of the sheeting that I hauled under here, like I couldn't see it until I got up to it. So I thought I was going to be smart and haul up all my materials, and then they'd be in place when I hit the next 8-foot span, and then I hit this, and it's actually something in the neighborhood of a 4-foot span. So unfortunately, some of these large sheets that I've hauled down here, I have to haul all the way back out and take them into the garage to cut them up, to cut them to size, to make them fit here. I just don't want to be breathing that stuff in. Like, there's no ventilation down here. I don't know what that material is. I can guarantee you that breathing the dust from that or anything is not good for you. So I'm just not doing that in here. Again, that's gonna suck, but considering the amount of materials that I have brought down here, it's a drop in the bucket. So over here, you'll see that this section has not been. I have a section here that I did re-insulate, and a section here that I didn't. And the reason that I didn't redo this one, there are two and a bit sections here that were actually okay, where the dampness was so very little that I'm not concerned about it not drying itself out on its own, or that I felt that compressing it with another layer of insulation really just wouldn't be helping that much, because I'd just be compressing the existing insulation. You know, what I put in would be equal to the R value that I'd be taking out. So I didn't, which is nice, because